Scandinavian workbenches, such as this fine example by Leif Carlson of Sweden, are superb cabinet making benches and particularly good at dovetails. One of their main features is this shoulder vise, which clamps directly behind the work and has no guide bars to get in the way. So it makes dovetailing a real pleasure. Now, the other feature of this vise, of this bench, is the very large tail vise, which allows you to clamp work between its dogs and is very effective. Now, in Scott Landis's book from 1987, this style of Scandinavian workbench with its shoulder vise and its tail vise was probably the most predominant one. Frank Claus and Tayfrid, among others, that were championing this. And now, sort of fast forward a few years, there are no commercial makers of this bench at all, which is a real shame because it's superb, really works well. So why is this? Well, the key to it is it's probably, of all the workbenches that you could make or have mass produced, it is the most complicated of all. There are massive dovetails in the vices, massive dovetails on each of the corner, and you're dealing with areas of cross grain and more cross grain here. So it's a complicated bench to build, and I think as a result of that, costs have gone up and people have, industry in particular, has taken shortcuts, and this bench is no longer available commercially. But I've been giving it quite a lot of thought, and I've come up with a bench that has these features or similar features, that is extremely sturdy, very stable, and one hell of a lot easier to build, and I'd like to show you that now. So here's my version of the Scandinavian workbench. It's solid, 4 inches thick, and one of the things you'll notice when you look at the grain is that everything moves in the same direction. So there's no need for dovetails on the corner, there's no cross grain. All of the areas can be worked on this bench, and construction is really quite easy indeed. So I've kept the tool well, which is typical of the Scandinavian bench. I've also kept the shoulder vise, and I've attached the vise jaw to the screw. This was an old screw that I was given with a 2.5 inch diameter. These were easily obtainable from Lake Erie Tool Works, or if you want a more reasonable option, then Lee Valley Tools also do a metal version of this. And again, this is simply built out all in the same direction. And then to counteract the potential splitting of this, which the force of the vise could potentially occur, there's a bolt which goes from the tool well right the way through here, and this just, as with the Scandinavian vices, just keeps everything nice and solid and stops anything from splitting out. So the frame, you'll also notice, is flush with the front, which in the Scandinavian vise it isn't. It has traditional sled feet, and this one has 4 solid 4-inch square posts on each corner. I made the framework from pine, just standard pine, which is 4 inches thick, actually extremely solid, strong, and very cheap as well. So when it came round to the tail vise, I don't really use tail vices that often, so I was questioning whether to even bother to put one on here. So I've instead of going the whole hog and fitting one from perhaps Lee Nielsen or Veritas do a nice quick release one, I've actually installed what is classed as an inset vise. Veritas make one, but this one here is from HNT Gordon in Australia, and I think it's just a little step up from that. So the vise works with this knob here, and it runs quite freely and grips very nicely, and so that just allows you to plane away, knowing that everything is fully under control. Now when this vise, when I installed it, the instructions didn't use a faceplate like this, and so they advocated screwing it down. And it didn't really look very nice, but the other thing as well is when you're planing your bench flat is if you got a little bit close to those screw heads, it could absolutely ruin your plane. So I'll show you what I did here, is I put in this cover, and instead of screwing it down, I simply, on the shooting board, made it a really tight friction fit. And because everything is moving in harmony, the nice tight fit has just stayed over the couple of years since I made this bench. So we'll just have a little look at the actual inset vise itself, because one of the advantages of these is they're very easy to fit. So this one simply has a single screw and a little lug. So the lug locates in there and the screw screws, and that's all that's needed to hold it dead firm. And you can see, in order to install it, all I used was a router, and there was the first one for the plate and then the second one to route out the base, and that's it. And so very smooth running aluminium vise. They're available in 2 different sizes and very easy to fit, particularly if you use solid wood as I've done in this bench. So that one slides back in there. This just screws down. And then the cover plate just fits there like that. So it's very effective, very neat, and very discreet. So, oh, and the one last thing is that the traditional Scandinavian bench has 5 legs. So at this particular point here, there'd be a leg supporting. Now, again, they used to go 5 or 6 inches gap here, but because this is predominantly for me, for the work that I do, I don't need such a wide opening. I've kept this opening down to 4 inches, and instead of having the 5th leg down to the floor, I've just simply in the 4-inch pine packed this out so that it gives all the support that's needed, without the interference of a 5th leg down on the floor. So that's not traditional, but I think is a nice handy feature, because you can find your foot bumping into that quite a lot. So there you have it, my version of the Scandinavian workbench. So it's very solid, very easy to make, relatively inexpensive, and I'd like to think that 1 or 2 of you will have a go. Thanks very much for watching.